Hello and welcome to Indian Standard Time. I'm Siddharth Varadarajan. Less than 24 hours before the National Security Advisors of India and Pakistan were to meet in Delhi, the talks were suddenly and abruptly called off. Pakistan said it was not in a position to accept the two conditions that India laid down for the talks. India, on its part, denied it had laid down any conditions and said that the basis for the talks had been settled at UFA, where the two prime ministers had met in July, and that if Pakistan was not willing to abide by the letter and spirit of UFA, there would be no point in having a dialogue. Joining me to discuss the breakdown in the talks, the UFA agreement, and to understand whether there might be any way to take the relationship forward is the High Commissioner of Pakistan, Mr. Abdul Basit.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to Rajya Sabha TV, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Siddharth, and very warm greetings to your viewers.
The purpose of this interview is for our viewers to understand Pakistan's point of view on this and to have a discussion on the merits and demerits of your position and to also try to understand how we could move the relationship forward. So let me begin by asking you the following. You may disagree that Pakistan set conditions for the talks. India says it did not set conditions. But be that as it may, Sushma Swaraj, the External Affairs Minister, in her press conference one day before the talks, mentioned two issues which she wanted Pakistan to clarify its stand on. And Pakistan was unable to do so, or was unwilling to do so. And so I want to discuss those issues. And the first one that she mentioned was that the purpose of the proposed meeting of the NSAs was to discuss all issues connected to terrorism. And Pakistan's insistence on wanting to discuss Jammu and Kashmir in some way represented a shift in the goalposts. Don't you think that is a valid point that she raised, that the agenda was terror and you were shifting the goalposts by trying to bring Kashmir in?
Thank you, Siddharth. First of all, let me say that as Pakistan High Commissioner here in New Delhi, I am really dismayed at the cancellation of the talks, because our side was fully prepared and we were coming to this meeting with a very positive mind and a constructive attitude, and we wanted this meeting to conclude on a positive note and it to become, an icebreaker. So that did not happen, unfortunately. Now, coming to your question, I agree with you that this meeting, NSA's meeting in New Delhi, was about terrorism. And we never insisted on broadening the agenda of this meeting. What our position was that since the two prime ministers agreed in UFA that in addition to NSA's meeting in New Delhi, there would also be discussion as to how we engage on other issues as well, including Jammu and Kashmir, Siachen, Sir Creek. So our intention was that in addition to terrorism, which is also of great concern to us, it would be a good opportunity in New Delhi to also discuss modalities for future dialogue. So that was our position.
If I understood what Sushma ji said, and I'm sure you watched the press conference carefully, she said India was quite willing to discuss Jammu and Kashmir and all outstanding issues as per the earlier composite dialogue or the renewed dialogue process. She said in order for that to happen and for that to be successful, a climate of trust was necessary, and that the whole purpose of UFA and the purpose of the NSA's initial talks on terrorism was to create that climate of trust. Seen in that light, was Pakistan then, were you trying to put the cart before the horse? Wouldn't it have been better to wait for this meeting and then take things forward, to discuss modalities of future meetings? This wasn't going to be the the one and only meeting that the two NSAs were going to have. So why cram everything into this one meeting, even if it meant the process was called off?
I agree. I absolutely agree. It is, and this position of India's is, from our perspective, is inconsistent with what was agreed to in UFA, because in UFA, it was clearly agreed between the two prime ministers, and there are a number of things which are not reflected in the joint statement, but which were discussed between the two prime ministers. Such as that, the two countries would discuss future modalities, how to take this dialogue process forward on Jammu and Kashmir and on other important issues. So again, what I am trying to suggest is that Pakistan's position was not to discuss in substantive terms Jammu and Kashmir at the NSA's meeting. Our position was to have, to discuss modalities for future dialogue on these issues. Accordingly, Pakistan's delegation, if you note, also included our foreign secretary. And we thought that if we did not get an opportunity to discuss this particular aspect as was discussed at UFA, perhaps the two foreign secretaries would get time to discuss separately as to how to move forward on other issues as well. So I do not know why India went back to its original position that unless there is terrorism, there is violence, we cannot have discussion on other issues, which I believe and our side believes is totally incompatible or inconsistent with what was agreed to.
I don't think the position of India is that it will talk only about terror. I think Sushma ji made a great deal of emphasis on the preambular and the operative part of UFA, and you will concede that the UFA statement, whatever may have been the understanding between the two prime ministers, did not reflect things as explicitly as you are saying now, in the sense that wouldn't it have been better?
No, let me clarify.
For these things to have been spelled out.
There is no preambular or operative para. There are two operative parts in this joint statement. If you look at the language, there is a chapeau paragraph, which is followed by a paragraph which says that both sides agreed. Right. Then there is another chapeau paragraph which says the two sides also agreed.
Also agreed to the 5 steps.
So there are two operative parts in this joint statement. So there is no preambular part or operative part.
Right. But in the sense that the 5 concrete steps that were identified,
nobody is questioning that.
Wouldn't it have been helpful, with the benefit of hindsight, if you were so insistent on even this issue of discussing the modalities of future dialogue in Kashmir, that could have been added? And this remains, as an observer of diplomacy, mystifying to me that if this is an issue that is so important for Pakistan, why was it not included in UFA? Why was no attempt made to include this in UFA?
I said
give us a sense of
when the two prime ministers meet, they discuss many things, and it is not necessary that everything should be included or incorporated into the joint statement. After all, two leaders are agreeing on many things.
But this is the most important issue from your point of view.
Absolutely, right. But that shows our flexibility.
Okay.
And we thought that we are agreeing to this joint statement in good faith, in good spirit. So let's take the whole process forward. So that was our intention.
There is a belief in India, in New Delhi, that the agreement which was at UFA, which was negotiated in good faith, became unstuck a couple of days after Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif returned to Islamabad, when there was a great deal of domestic criticism that he had to face for having excluded the so-called K word, the fact that Kashmir was not mentioned. And the perception is that it was largely because of that pressure from other politicians, from hardline sections of the Pakistani establishment, that he felt compelled to, in a way, move the goalposts.
There was no question of moving the goalposts because, terrorism is also a very, very important issue for us. As I said at the outset, we were coming to the New Delhi meeting fully prepared. So there is no question about moving the goalposts. In Pakistan, right from Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah to the present, there is national consensus on the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, as it is on now terrorism. So these issues are very, very important. And I think India also realizes the fact that it is a Jammu and Kashmir dispute which continues to bedevil our relationship. We have fought so many wars on that. How it is possible that putting this particular or giving short shrift to this issue, you can expect to build, peace between the two countries or viable, lasting peace between the two countries. Sooner or later, we will have to talk on that. And again, I would underscore the fact that Pakistan was not insisting to have substantive discussion on Jammu and Kashmir at the NSA's meeting. Our point was that if NSAs could not talk on the modalities, let the two foreign secretaries talk on this issue separately. So that was our contention. And I do not know how the Indian side got this impression that Pakistan would like to have a substantive discussion on Jammu and Kashmir at the NSA's meeting.
One of the points that the Indian side has raised as evidence of Pakistan's reluctance to pursue the UFA agenda was the long time you took to get back to India's proposal of dates. Madam Swaraj said that it was on July 23rd that
Absolutely,
Pakistan was
that is
informed.
correct.
Pakistan then took 3 weeks to get back. Why the delay if this was something that was so important?
There were certain things which we were considering, and we responded to the Indian suggested dates, I think on the 14th of August, our Independence Day. And you would notice that when we handed over the list of our delegation, it also included the foreign secretary.
Okay.
So we had certain considerations because we wanted this Delhi, meeting or our encounter at Delhi more purposeful and constructive. Okay. So we took time, but at the end of the day, we did convey our acceptance. We did not propose another set of dates. We agreed to the dates, and we, as I said, we were coming, well prepared.
The second issue that Sushma Swaraj raised in her press conference, the red line, what we call it in the media, is that Pakistan should not meet the leaders of the Hurriyat conference. Now, to most people around the world, certainly in India, this would appear to be a very reasonable demand or a very reasonable expectation, in the sense that the Hurriyat are considered separatist leaders. And the counter that could be asked to Pakistan is, how would your government react if visiting dignitaries were to have meetings with separatists either from Gilgit-Baltistan or from Balochistan? It wouldn't go down very well with your government, would it?
No, you are mixing apples and oranges, Siddharth, because Kashmir is a dispute which you recognize, we recognize, and we have been talking on this dispute for years now. Right. So, there is this analogy, in my view, is not correct. As for meeting the Hurriyat leaders, you know that Pakistan, since 1995, our politicians, our leaders, our high commissioners have been meeting them without an issue, without any problem from the New Delhi point of view. So now this is a new condition which has been set. And then again, we find some confusion in the Indian stance since August last year.
No, but they were very clear last year that this is a deal breaker. The foreign secretary level talks were called off on this issue.
But since then, there has been some, modulations, I would say, in Indian position.
On you meeting the Hurriyat?
Absolutely.
How so?
Because sometimes they would say they're allowed to meet at receptions on the sidelines of iftar parties. Then you can meet them before the talks. You can meet them after the talks. So we have been receiving
mixed signals.
Mixed signals, yeah.
That said, given the depth of feeling last August, wouldn't it have been wise for the two sides at UFA to have had an understanding on this issue? Given the fact that it had already been a deal breaker, why didn't the two prime ministers or the two foreign officers say, look, let's agree to disagree or agree?
Because from our side, it is not an issue which can be discussed, because ours is a principled position, and there is no point from our side to really show any accommodation on this.
Part of the reason why this is such a sensitive issue in India is not just that the Hurriyat are considered separatists, but that Pakistan refuses to meet or to engage with the elected representatives of Jammu and Kashmir. Why is Pakistan unwilling to accord, in your view, the same status to the elected representatives? In other words, you insist on describing the all-party Hurriyat's conference leaders as the only or the sole representatives, when clearly any reasonable person would say that's not the case. They may represent a section, but there are other leaders who represent other sections. Why is Pakistan
because we do not,
unwilling to meet or to accord any recognition to these
because
other
we
leaders?
do not recognize those elections which take place in Jammu and in J&K. Our position is very clear. We still strongly believe that plebiscite needs to be held there and give this right to the people of Jammu and Kashmir to determine their future. Their right to self-determination is, I think, fundamental. And we hope that at some time in future, they will be allowed to exercise this right.
This isn't the time or place for us to have a full-fledged discussion on the J&K issue.
J&K, yeah.
But let me pose a thought with you, leave a thought with you, that if India has a red line that Pakistan cannot meet the Hurriyat, and if Pakistan has its red line that, well, we will meet the Hurriyat, where do you see the process going? Is there any hope of the two sides picking up the threads of engagement again?
No, I think first of all, the first point is, I think what we expect from our Indian friends is to acknowledge the importance and the centrality of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute.
But Mr. Raj is quite clear about that we have no problem with discussing
but
it.
there are conditions, attached to that position, that unless this happens, we cannot talk. So this is not the understanding which was reached at UFA. So if we need to revert to what was agreed to in UFA, and then we can take it from there. So Pakistan is very much committed to comply with the UFA statement, with the UFA commitment, and we are willing to once again engage with India and engage, comprehensively. We cannot afford to cherry pick. While NSA's talks are related to terrorism issues, but on the other hand, the two sides, in order to achieve good results and move, in all areas, we strongly feel that the time has come to reflect on what happened in the run-up to the New Delhi meeting, and then see how the two countries can re-engage.
But there is this complexity of the Hurriyat and this red line. How do you, if neither side is willing to be flexible on this, how do you see any possibility of?
No, I think in diplomacy, one leaves a door ajar and it is not permanently locked. And I think on both sides there are smart people, and I'm sure once there is agreement on the fundamentals that we need to discuss all issues. I think we can find a way out.
This is not insurmountable.
But as far as our meeting with the Hurriyat is concerned, as a principle, there is simply no compromise on that.
One of the other subjects or issues which muddies the atmosphere, muddies the waters as it were, is the public trading of charges. We've seen in the past year Pakistani officials accuse India of complicity in acts of terror in Pakistan. We've seen the similar charge in India against Pakistan. How helpful do you think it is for the two sides to publicly trade charges?
That is very unfortunate. I think to conduct diplomacy through the media is never a good idea. In Pakistan, if you have seen, at least in the last 1-2 weeks, Pakistan has not indulged in that. Now we are looking at various dossiers, making headlines.
But Mr. Aziz at his press conference waived his dossiers.
Not the contents, okay. But here we are every day.
No, but here the government of India also has not provided any contents.
I do not know then how they are leaked or they find their way in or become headlines in Indian newspapers.
Journalists have
you guys are very smart then.
Let's talk about the line of control and the boundary, the border or the boundary that you call. The two sides trade charges, they're trading gunfire. There doesn't seem to be any agreement on who started it first, but people on your side and on our side are suffering. Innocent people are getting killed, getting targeted. How hopeful are you that the meeting of BSF and Rangers will somehow find a way to put a stop to this and return to the status quo ante before 2013, when, for a decade that ceasefire held?
We would like to, again, we are preparing ourselves for this meeting, and we will propose a mechanism as to how we can ensure that these violations do not take place, because innocent civilians are being killed on both sides. So I think reinforcing the November 2003 understanding, I think, is important. And Pakistan again will come to this meeting with sincerity of purpose and seriousness of purpose, because we do not see as to why the ceasefire continues to be violated.
The arrest of this Naved terrorist at the border at Udhampur has, in a way, provided further evidence that hostile elements within Pakistan, not the government of Pakistan necessarily, but hostile elements, hostile organizations there, continue to find ways to penetrate the LOC or the border to conduct acts of terror in India. The response of Pakistan upon the arrest of Naved, even before, I think even to this day, the government of India hasn't formally accused Pakistan of involvement in that person's activities. But there was a sense in which Pakistani authorities went into denial. Wouldn't it have been more helpful for the Pakistani side to say, okay, give us his details, rather than immediately Nadra was saying, we have no record? It's not possible to come to such conclusions.
We have asked Indians to give us details, but we would not like to respond to media reports unless we receive something officially and formally from the Indian government.
And have you received anything officially?
Nothing.
No details about this person's identity?
Nothing.
Right. But were you to receive it, you are willing to give an undertaking that you will investigate that?
If there are any things which need to be investigated, we will definitely do that.
Right. Where does the process go from here? We know that the BSF and the Rangers will have their meeting. There was some talk, although not in a very positive context, of the two NSAs meeting each other in New York and exchanging dossiers. Is there at all a likelihood of high-level political conversation or contact between the two sides, say in New York or in the run-up to New York? Do you foresee any possibility of that?
Pakistan, and especially our Prime Minister, is committed to normalizing this important relationship. And you would remember that he took an exceptional step and attended Prime Minister Modi's swearing-in ceremony in New Delhi. Our commitment is there, and we will continue pursuing this objective. Now, if India sets conditions for these talks and limits our interaction only to one particular issue, which
as a first step,
step, we do not have any qualms about doing that as well. But at the same time, in parallel to that meeting, I think it is essential that our two countries sit together and see how we can engage each other on other important issues as well. This is the crux of our position, because we cannot wait indefinitely and then keep on one issue, which is, important to us as well, as I'm saying again and again. But on the other hand, other issues are perhaps more important, especially the Jammu and Kashmir dispute.
The reason I ask about the possibility of future engagement is because you know from experience, and we know as observers, that when India and Pakistan don't talk, relations tend to deteriorate.
Absolutely.
And that can't be in the interest of either side.
I totally agree with you. And then, dialogue is not a favor by one country to another. Peace is in our mutual interests, and we cannot achieve peace unless we talk to each other. It is as simple as that.
We're pretty much out of time, but I wanted to end with the last question. Your understanding of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Pakistan policy as a Pakistani diplomat. Certainly in India, people have been impressed with the invitation that he issued for his inauguration, the effort that was made at UFA. It's very clear, whatever the history of the relationship may have been, but this Prime Minister and this government has, on at least 2 occasions, tried to move the relationship forward. What's your assessment of the Prime Minister's approach, and how his approach and the approach of Nawaz Sharif might, in the future at least, provide a basis for forward?
No, it'll behoove me to comment publicly on India's Pakistan policy. It is for you, friends, to to comment. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, we are very clear. We want to have a good relationship with India and move from conflict to cooperation. And that, I think, not only in our bilateral interests, but also in the interest of this region and beyond. Look at the world where it is going. If you look at SAARC region, our intra-regional trade is not more than 5%. Whereas if you go to EU or ASEAN or NAFTA, there is regional economic cooperation flourishing, thriving. Whereas in this region, we are still stuck with old narratives, and the time has now come to move beyond this vicious circle and to make this, to transform this into a virtuous cycle, so that all the 2 countries as well as all regional countries benefit from this cooperation.
Mr. Basit, this has been a bad week for India-Pakistan relations, but here's hoping that future weeks and future months will produce something more positive.
Inshallah.
Thank you for joining us on Al Jazeera TV.
Very kind of you.
That wraps up this episode of Indian Standard Time. Do join us again next week for another guest, another show.